welcome back to Rise to Liberty, the first show of the year. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful New Year's. Today, I am joined by Liquid Zulu. But before we jump into everything real quick, I am going to drop the sponsor, which is Nadeau Shave Company. Get the closest shave that you possibly can get. And I mean, they have the balls to sponsor this show. So that's something. The days of big shave are over. All of these multi-blade plastic razors, which just cause razor burn, ingrown hairs, you don't need them. They're overpriced, Chinese-made junk. So get or buy from a company that is veteran-owned, family-operated, and actually gives a shit about their customers. And you can go to nadeaushaveco.com, NADEAUSHAVECO.com. Use promo code RISE15 for 15% off, and you will not regret it. It is absolutely the best Nadeau Shave Company where tradition beats modernity. So, Liquid Zulu, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Not too bad. It's snowing over here, so it's been a bit of a mess. We haven't had any snow pretty much all winter, but now we're just getting dumped on.
Yeah, at least it saved it up.
Yeah, exactly, and it's supposed to keep going for the next little bit. But yeah, other than that, it's going well. Just dealing with idiots that love the state all the time. I just got done arguing with somebody for like almost a full week about climate change, which is ridiculous. Just trying to say that, the state is going to censor any dissenting opinions from what they want to be able to make them rich or anything. And for whatever reason, like this is just such a hard concept for people to grasp that science can be bought and paid for just like anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and my opinion on environmentalism is I think it's a horrible, evil ideology. I think we should destroy every last bit of natural anything on Earth. So I'm a big fan of climate change.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There's a lot of depopulation theory that just runs through the center of everything. It's just like just kill everybody, save the Earth. It's like no, that seems like such a terrible idea. So I did want to get into who are you and where did you get these ideas from? What led you to believe what you believe?
Sure. So I suppose initially what got me into thinking about suppose philosophy in general would be the old atheism wave back when Atheism Plus was still a thing. There were all those like Armored Skeptic and Dark Matter 2525, all those sorts of guys. Thunderfoot as well. They did a bunch of like atheism videos, and I was like, hell yeah, that's great and all. And then they started doing it started shifting from the atheism stuff into the feminism rank stuff when Gamergate came along. I think I saw a video by Sargon McCad, like feminist record compilation, like number 32 or whatever, or why people hate feminists, number 32. And I was like, well, feminism, that's just equality, that didn't seem to me. But I watched it, I was completely convinced, and that's where I pivoted into more politics. And then further down the line, I saw a John Stossel video recommended, and it was some sort of libertarian whatever. And I was like, oh no, that's got to be nonsense. And I watched it trying to debunk it. And I was like, oh, you know what? He's actually saying the truth here. And then getting into more, hardcore stuff is I saw a video by Michael Moreno, who I believe his channel is like private these days. But if you saw the video like ages ago, where it's like a debate student gets like thrown off the stage because he cited Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. He did that video. It went viral like years ago, and that's how I discovered him. And then, so I knew he was like this smart guy and everything. And then he posted this video explaining why the Supreme Court's LGBT ruling was unjust or immoral or something like that. I think he probably used the word immoral. And it was basically, this was a stance I'd never heard before. I was like, well, it seems obvious to me that discrimination is something which is a bad thing. That we should stop people from discriminating. And he made the case that no, it's actually it's the complete opposite. We should completely allow people to discriminate because it's their own damn property. He
Yeah.
went for the exact same way, but that was the gist of the argument. And then when I joined Michael Moreno's server after that video, because I was just so moved by like the uniqueness of it, I'd never seen something like that before. Um, I started getting to conversations with where like AnCaps were sending me videos, and I was like, "What's this whole anarcho-capitalism thing? That also seems nonsense." And I was convinced by that, and then you know, etc., etc. Now I'm trying to unite objectivism and anarcho-capitalism because I think those two philosophies need to be integrated, and that is the next big step in philosophy. And philosophy cannot properly progress until that integration has happened. And I think I have the chops to do it.
I would have to agree. Um, Not only that you have the chops to do it, but also that is the next big movement. Um, so I interviewed Michael Oliver quite a while ago.
Yes, I heard about him. He did a book on this. I haven't read it yet, but
Yeah,
yeah, he was basically trying to do the same thing like decades
yeah.
ago.
And you know what's funny about him is that he just like he wrote this book and he hung out with Murray Rothbard and he just now barely even thinks about it. It's
Yeah,
just not even a thing to him. He's just like, "Oh yeah, I just wrote this book while I was in college and I can't even believe that people still read this." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, like this is the next big thing. I can't believe that you're just like so nonchalant about it."
yeah. You need someone to have a hyper fixation on it. I think, which I definitely do. Um, that's that I don't want to whatever path I take in life. It's going to have to include integrating objectivism and anarcho-capitalism, or else I won't choose it.
So, is that what you would consider yourself as a anarcho-capitalist?
Yes, in with respect to legal theory, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, but philosophy in general, I just call myself an objectivist because I think it's naturally implied by objectivism. Hence, why I think they can be so cleanly integrated.
Yeah. Do you kind of want to give just like a quick rundown for what both of these are, just for anybody listening that might not know?
Sure. So, sort of the um, most concise definition of objectivism I can come up with would be it's a philosophy where you consistently apply the primacy of existence across the board. So what I mean by that is there are basically this is the big innovation by Ayn Rand in metaphysics, is that she identified that there are two fundamental stances in metaphysics. Either existence has primacy or consciousness has primacy. So what it would look like for existence to have primacy is, existence exists whether or not we're conscious of it. It's just going to do its own things, and then we are after that, and we're trying to apprehend these immutable laws of nature as they are, right? And then the alternative view would be where consciousness has primacy, where there are a few different forms of this. There's the supernatural consciousness that would be God is the one who decides what the rules of nature are, and he can change them at will, and it's his consciousness who has primacy. Then there'd be primacy of the social consciousness, which would be something like, well, it depends on the agreement. It depends on your social conditioning. That's what determines what reality is. And if we all just decide that we want there to be more money without inflation, then we can just agree on that, and it'll be true. That would be the social primacy of social consciousness, which is a derivation from Kant. And another derivation from Kant is the more directly is the primacy of the personal consciousness, which is the idea that it is your own mind. It's not really necessarily a derivation from Kant, but it's your own mind is dictating the laws of nature. You are determining that there is such a thing as causality and existence and identity and all these different things. And that is why we have them, because you have certain structures in your brain and that projects out. Um, so To highlight this, it would be, I just saw a clip on Twitter earlier, in fact, of this lady in Peru where she thought she was a witch and she was standing by a mudslide, and people were like shouting at her, get the hell away from there! There's a landslide. You're gonna die. And they're like, oh no, she she thinks she's a witch. It's like, she's not a witch. Get the hell away from there, you viewer, get out of there. And she is adopting a stance of the primacy of consciousness there. She thinks it's her mind which controls whether or not the landslide will happen. She doesn't think that the landslide will happen if she doesn't want it to happen, right? That would be the basic rundown of at least the objectivist metaphysics. So obviously, there's a whole lot more beyond that, but it's just consistently applying this view of the primacy of existence. That is the essence of objectivism. So then anarcho-capitalism, what that is, it's the legal theory developed by Murray Rothbard, where basically he's taking the individualist anarchism of Spooner and Tucker, which was developed from the earlier anarchism of course, Proudhon, where it's just sort of like no rulersism, and we don't know what exactly it means to rule someone. It's kind of vague and up in the air. He took that and he combined it with Mises' insight of praxeology. So he's applying praxeological analysis to legal theory. And what the big takeaway from this is the non-aggression principle as like the fundamental axiom of law. Because what we're doing in law is we're trying to answer this question of, well, we've got this thing called scarcity out here, where two men can't use the same stick for different ends at the same time. So therefore, ethics has to answer the question of, well, who should win in that conflict then? Where a conflict is contradictory actions, mutually exclusive actions. Crusoe using the stick to spearfish excludes Friday from using it to stoke his fire. They can't both happen. So we've got this question of scarcity. How do we resolve this conundrum? Who should win in the conflict? And the answer given by Murray Rothbard, which I can give the derivation for if you want. Well, my derivation at least, not Rothbard's. Which is that the non-aggressor should win. The person who did not initiate the conflict is the one who should win. So if Crusoe got the stick first and he was going to the ocean to spearfish with it, then he should be the one who controls that stick. He has a right to control it. Sorry, which is what we call ownership. We say that Crusoe has a property right in that stick, i.e., when Friday comes along and tries to take it from him, he isn't allowed to do that. We say that that's a bad thing, that he has violated Crusoe's property right there, and those would be the two main ones. And if you want, we can move on to something else. But if you want, I can tie these two together to show why I think they are so inextricably linked with objectivism and the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, let's just get into it.
So basically, the idea is that this is a modification of Rothbard's argumentum e contrario for self-ownership, which he developed in his Ethics of Liberty. If you just look up argumentum e contrario within there, you'll probably find it. It's not a very often used term. So basically, the idea is, well, we've got this problem of scarcity, so we can have conflicts. That's just definitely the case. So how should we resolve these conflicts? And there are three basic answers to this. One is the law of the jungle, where we're just like, who gives a shit? Just do whatever the hell you want. Makes right. These all fall under the auspices of law of the jungle, where you're just kind of throwing up your hands and you don't care about conflicts. You think it's just a non-issue or something, right? The reason why this would be false. Sorry, I suppose I'll list them first. Yeah. The second option from law of the jungle would be the NEP, right? Where you have it that the non-aggressor should win the conflict, right? And then the third option is mixed law, where it's somewhere in between these two. It's sometimes the aggressor should win, sometimes he shouldn't, for whatever reason, right? So the reason why the law of the jungle is false, and these are the only three options you can possibly have. Either you don't care about them, either you do care about them and the non-aggressor should win, or sometimes the non-aggressor should win, sometimes he shouldn't, right? Because even if you have like always the aggressor should win, that's still a form of law of the jungle, where you're just not caring and you're thinking it's might makes right. So the reason why law of the jungle is false is that it's essentially whim worship. It is I'm going to take that stick from Crusoe because I want to, and that's the only justification I need. I don't actually have to justify this with respect to any sort of legal norms, because I don't care about any of that. But of course, that would be a certain ethic he's espousing. But ethics isn't just, it doesn't just float on its own. It rests upon epistemology. So what would be the epistemology he is presupposing here? He's presupposing that if he wants to do something, he therefore should do it. I.e., if he believes that it is the case that he should be go ahead and doing this, then it is in fact the case that he should go ahead and do this, which is a whim epistemology, I call it. And that, you can see how that would then tail back into the primacy of consciousness, that it's his mind which is determining what it is that he should be doing in this situation, right? It's not that reality has primacy and he's just secondary to that. It's that his mind has primacy, right? And I suppose the reason why that would be false, I don't think I actually touched on this earlier. It seems, sort of intuitive why the primacy of consciousness would be false. But the validation of that is basically that consciousness is consciousness of existence. You can't have this floating concept of consciousness where it's not conscious of anything, because a consciousness not conscious of anything isn't a consciousness. It's a contradiction in terms. So what we have here with the primacy of consciousness view is a stolen concept. They've stolen the concept of consciousness from the primacy of existence viewpoint, and then they've used it, and they've just taken it as being on its own. And we're going to take this as the starting point. But it depends upon the prior concept of existence, something to be conscious of. You have to be conscious of something before you can deduce that you're conscious, right? So that would be the negation of the law of the jungle viewpoint. And then the third viewpoint I listed there was mixed law. The reason why mixed law is false is sort of more technical in certain respects. But and I've got like a paper going over this. I could post it or something at some point. I'll post it somewhere at some point. It floats around there, here and there, where basically, if we have this sort of mixed law view where it's like, well, yes, sometimes we should be aggressing on people, sometimes we should be doing this. That still ultimately nails down into the primacy of consciousness. It's still a whim epistemology. It's in this situation, the Führer says that the aggressor should win, and therefore it's the case. So it's primacy of the Führer's consciousness. Or in this situation, we've all voted that the aggressor should win. It would be primacy of social consciousness, right? Or in this case, it would be the proletarian logic says that this aggression is fine. So therefore, again, primacy of social consciousness, polylogism, right? So that would be the negation of that. And then also on the mixed law view, there's an interesting feature which comes out of this, which is argumentation ethics, which comes from Hoppe, where if you were to propose this should sort of like stop anyone in their tracks when they're trying to propose a mixed law system. If you're to propose any sort of mixed law system, you're doing so in an argumentation, but an argumentation is itself a rights respecting, conflict avoiding activity. So the only way you could possibly propose your stance is by first accepting, well, yeah, no, it's definitely not true whenever I'm trying to be reasonable, whenever I'm trying to be civilized. Yeah, no, my stance isn't true. But sometimes it's true, and I can't ever argue in those situations. I can't ever be civilized in this situation. It's like they're already accepting that they're being uncivilized there. They're already accepting implicitly that what they're doing is whim worship. And then so we've destroyed the law of the jungle and mixed law, and the only alternative left is the NEP. So the NEP is true. That's basically my argument.
I think that's a pretty solid argument. Um, I would actually, if there's anybody out there that ever listens to this, I would be very curious to anyone's argument against that. And I'm sure you get quite a bit of pushback. Well, I've seen you on Twitter and some of the arguments that you've had, um, which actually does lead me to wonder, where does hedonism sit in all of this? Is that more of the law of the jungle?
So hedonism isn't necessarily a legal viewpoint. I would say law of the jungle would, hedonism as applied to law would be a form of the law of jungle, certainly. But hedonism is sort of broader, where it's this sort of almost Nietzschean or stern right viewpoint where anything is a moral value if it's intended to be for myself. If the goal of the action is to benefit myself, that means it's beneficial. What Ayn Rand says about that is basically that it's a package deal. There are two fundamental questions you have to answer when you're making any sort of ethical theory. First, you have to answer what a value is, and then you have to answer who the recipient of value should be. And both altruism and hedonism substitute the first question with the second question. They just ignore that first question of caring about what a value is in the first place, and then just go on and say, well, if it's intended for myself, then it must be good, and that is a moral action, right? So they have to untangle this package deal because these are two different questions. They can't be answered in the same breath. And that would be the defeat of both altruism and hedonism. Because altruism is just saying, instead of being where it's whatever it's for me and I'm the intended recipient, that makes it a good action. It's whenever it's intended for someone else. So long as I'm not the recipient, then it's good, right? So they would be destroyed in the same argument.
Yeah. So where do you see, at least I would say, because in case anyone doesn't know, you're actually over in Europe, right? The UK.
Mhm.
So in Western civilization, where do you view Western civilization as sitting currently in respects to where we are legally? Because it seems as though things are heading in the opposite direction in every way that, at least here in the States, like, if you this country seems to be heading in the opposite direction in which our founding fathers um, intended our legal system to head. In fact, I would view the United States the exact type of government that was warned about by, you know, people like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. Um, we are now living under the exact type of government that we were warned about. So how do you view Western civilization and where we are heading legally?
So basically, the cause of all of this is the rise of Kant within philosophy, because there was this big, there are skeptic waves throughout all of the history of philosophy, where it's just like, well, maybe we can't know anything. Who cares? And whenever you have one of these skeptic waves, it always gets answered. Skepticism just can't last forever. It's not possible. So it ends up getting answered at some point, either by an Aristotle or by a Plato, right? But in the wake of Hume, when Hume was posing his question of how can we achieve any certainty of reality, um, then Kant was the one who answered him, who was the arch Platonist, basically. You couldn't
Yeah.
have asked for a worse philosopher to answer Hume, and that is what caused the rise of Nazi Germany. It's what caused the rise of communism. It's what's caused every problem with respect to our legal system you see today. Um, and that is why the US has gone downhill. It hasn't gone downhill, because of like, oh, there aren't enough great men, or the psychological conditions are ripe for a dictator or anything like that. This is all downstream from philosophy. The reason why the US is going downhill is because they accepted Kantian philosophy, at least implicitly. So, on Kant's view, reason is completely negated. Man's mind is completely negated. It has no power to do anything. So you have to look towards these all-powerful mystic dictators, and they'll tell you what to do. And you see this all over the place. I mean, people like to call Rand's villains unrealistic, but really, I've never found more realistic villains than Rand's villains. They surround you every day. You just have to know what to look for. So that is what has caused the US to decline. But, now we have an answered Kant. We have Ayn Rand, thankfully. And that is why I view what I'm doing as the most important philosophical project, because Ayn Rand herself wasn't entirely consistent in applying the primacy of existence. She wasn't consistent specifically in politics. She viewed politics as an actual area of philosophy, which it isn't. So what she was doing in her politics was, we have man, we want to be supporting man's reason, right? So what sort of society should we have in order to allow man to be rational? And that's already taking like a societal primacy there, right? It's what sort of how do we want to organize society? How should we organize the polis, right? But the polis doesn't have any sort of actual existence unto itself. It's just a derivative of the individuals that make it up. So the real question she should have been answering was, how do you resolve conflicts? And this is what Murray Rothbard got right. And if you just apply Ayn Rand's reasoning to the correct question, which is how do you resolve conflicts, then you get this brilliant system of anarcho-capitalist legal theory properly situated in its place in philosophy, and the whole system just completely works, right? And that is what is required to truly make a formidable force against Kant. Because Kant, say what you want about him, but the guy was really rigorous with everything he did. Like he didn't cut many corners. It's basically impossible to read a single word he says because he speaks in philosophies rather than English. But he was very rigorous still. He built up
Yeah.
this massive system, and like every part like connects to other parts. It's not clear how it connects, but you know it's in there if you have the correct mystic chops, I suppose. But yeah, so we need a truly down to earth, grounded philosophy which everybody can understand and which completely annihilates every single myth born from the primacy of consciousness. And that is what I am pursuing here.
What do you believe to be the the biggest thing standing in the way of people accepting this? Because when I came across this idea of anarcho-capitalism, it just seemed to fit so naturally, and it just, I mean, I hate to make this argument because it's not an argument, but it felt right.
Mhm.
You know, it just seemed, it seemed correct. I don't understand how else to explain it other than just that, and
Yes,
it's so simple.
so that makes sense because I have had the same experience, and many other people have had the same experience. What this is we are honest in our viewpoints. We are honestly trying to comprehend reality, and we implicitly understand all of these facts about metaphysics, epistemology, law. We implicitly understood them the whole time. Um, but then when you get that explication of it, it's like a just, oh, that's so obvious. Of course, that's the correct way of doing it. Because if you're truly an honest person, then you must implicitly accept at least the basic version of objectivism, right? So, what would be keeping people from accepting this, certain people at least, is that they are chronic evaders. They are chronically just ignoring their sense data. They're chronically just ignoring reality, trying to push it away. And as they do this more and more and more, they start having all these problems cropping up, which are born from their own choice to evade. And that makes it even harder for them to actually start the task of like, rebuilding this house of cards that they keep building, making it proper, right? I should say. That is what stops people from accepting um, anarcho-capitalism and objectivism. And fundamentally, it's not so the upshot of that for praxis is you aren't able to actually think for them, just as you can't digest food for them. They have to make that choice to actually think on their own. Um, but there are people out there who are honest people and who really do want to go about this and apprehend reality. And you just have to speak the message, and when they hear it, they're gonna join along. They're gonna be like, "Yeah, that's completely correct." And a certain subset of them are gonna be like actually like actively going along with you and trying to also preaching the message. And this is it's found in a lot of different political theories. One big one would be Albert J. Nock's essay, something about the remnant. I can't remember the exact title of it. But basically, the idea is there's this remnant out there, which if you just speak the message on their pulpit every single day, they're going to hear you, and then they're going to start spreading it as well, and then more will hear you. And at first everyone's laughing at you, laughing out the room, But eventually, you start getting a nice little following. We call these people, when they're actually fighting along with you, the vanguard. And once you have a sizable vanguard, you don't need that many people to really do a big shift, because most people are second-handers. They are just following along with whatever the political temperature is at any given moment. They don't really think for themselves at all. And Lenin found this out. He had like what 15% of like the political seats in Russia, and he was able to take the entire country over. Like a very small amount of political power, but he had situated himself correctly in order to take over the biggest country on earth. I shouldn't say greatest, but yeah, biggest country on earth.
Yeah.
And if you want to know more about that specifically, look up libertarian Leninism on YouTube. There's some videos by Springtime of Nations which goes over this in greater detail.
That seems like quite a mix. Libertarian Leninism.
It's basically Leninist strategy, but applied to libertarianism.
Interesting. I mean, at least, Lenin was successful. Of all things, he might have not been correct, but he was successful nonetheless. That's really interesting. I'll have to look into that. So it basically just comes down to people just not being honest and just rejecting truth. Because I mean, everything that I've dealt with dealing with people, it seems exactly as that. It's just people evading everything. I've I've given so much evidence to certain people in certain situations, and it's almost like I didn't, and they just don't even acknowledge that, and then continue on with just whatever bullshit argument they have.
Yeah, exactly.
So my question is because obviously you've dealt with this as well. There's a certain point where it doesn't even become worth it to continue the conversation, obviously, because there's, just like you said, you can't think for them. They have to think for themselves. So I guess my question would be, is for the people who do recognize all of these things, who do accept objective truth, what motivation do you have to just like keep going and doing this? Because it seems as though a lot of people these days, even if they see these things, they tend to want to give up eventually because it gets so, it seems so hopeless. So what keeps you motivated to just keep going and arguing these points?
Well, for me, it's a selfish motivation, as the classic objectivist would say, of course. So the reason why I do it is because I want to do this as a career. It's the only thing I find particularly enjoyable is discussing philosophy and learning about philosophy and doing these things. I find it a very personally enjoyable thing to do, and I want to be able to continue doing it. So if I do it for a public, I'm not really concerned about whether my great 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 grandchildren will live under objectivism, because I'm not going to be alive anymore. But I am concerned with whether or not I can keep doing this sustainably, and that would require me turning it into a career, which requires me doing it publicly.
Hey, I appreciate the honesty. um, I do want to ask you about one particular type of person, though. Um, for anyone who didn't catch this, Liquid Zulu was already on my channel last year. We had held a debate, first debate for my channel. I thought it went over very well. But I want to ask about the minarchist, because to me, some of these people seem to be the most frustrating people for me to deal with. And the person you had debated, Roger, he is a friend of mine. Uh, I've grown really close with him over like the COVID thing is when we had met, and however, that part of him I do not like. That's just not something about him that I like. But I can have friends with differing opinions. But what do you believe it is with the minarchist? Why is it so easy to believe 90%? and then just like this last 5-10%, they're just like, no, 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 I can't go without a military, or I can't go without, border
Hmm.
patrol.
Huh. Let's see. I think it's just this general tendency we see a lot, even beyond the minarchists, where people are unaccustomed to truly consistent thinking and being consistent in every aspect because they get uncomfortable after a certain point and then they listen to their uncomfortableness, they place that over the truth, and then they're like, well, I'm not going to go any further. I mean, we see this with not just the minarchists but also Walter Block. He's an anarchist, right? And he says there's such a thing as a virtuous crime. He thinks that, well, yes, the NEP is a general rule of thumb, it applies almost always, but then there are these cases where someone's suicidal and they're going to jump off of a cliff, and it's fine for you to violate their property rights and pull them off that cliff. You'd be committing a crime, sure, but it's a virtuous crime. And then I address these sorts of people in the final lesson of my libertarian ethics course, where basically it's the view that law is not a subset of ethics, that it perhaps intersects, that there are certain crimes which are indeed criminal, but it's not a subset, which is what I claim, that, yeah, law is an actual perfect subset of ethics, that there is no such a thing as a crime that you should commit. And the sort of I've already gone over the derivation of the NEP, which was from ethics, so you can already see there how you'd get it to being a subset, but also just on a general level, if law is not a subset of ethics, what exactly is law describing? If it's not describing when and how you should deal with conflicts, what are you saying when you say that something is a right? What are you saying when I say that I have a property right in something? What exactly does that claim mean? Does it just mean that if you were to try and take it from me, that would be aggression? So okay, so what? Right? So what if it's aggression? Who gives a shit? Right? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter, right? So that would be a general tendency where people are unwilling to really be entirely consistent in their viewpoint. And I'm not sure what exactly it is that keeps people from that, if they've gone so far. But after a certain point, they just get a little bit too uncomfortable, and then they place their feelings over the facts, in the words of Ben Shapiro.
you know, for such a little whiny man, he has said a few great things. I don't know if that makes him a great man or not, but I would probably argue not.
Yeah.
But especially these days, uh, man, his whining has just gotten out of control.
Mhm.
But yeah, the minarchist always just seems so interesting to me. I understand the rationale as far as like why that might be attractive, but it I sat and argued with a gentleman one night um about shipping lanes, and he was telling me that of course we couldn't have full anarcho-capitalism because we need a military to protect the shipping lanes and all of these other things, and this was something that he did in the military. It was part of his job was, basically being a privateer, being hired by the state to be able to protect shipping lanes. And I flat out told him and got him to agree that it would be better for him to start a business focused on doing exactly that. He has the experience to do it. And it would be better for him to do it instead of having somebody like the government who has no experience in doing this, that they outsource everything. And he agreed to it and still just couldn't make that extra leap to be like, I understand what you're trying to say. And so I view the minarchist, or people that just can't take that last little step of faith, or just acknowledging the objective reality of it. I just find those people the most frustrating because they're so close. They're just like right there.
Yeah.
So, but I do believe that debate did go over well. I got a lot of good feedback, even from your audience as well. I thought it was good. I thought it was eye opening. Just for the record, I think you did win the debate.
Yes. Of course, you're an honest man.
Yes, yes. Um, one thing I did want to touch on, this is a very um, controversial topic. I don't think it should be. However, there's not too many people I would genuinely want to talk about this about or talk about with just because people just get crazy. But I had seen an argument you were having with somebody over the age of consent, which as soon as people hear that, they automatically go to like a sexual place, which seems very strange to me.
Mhm,
That's like the automatic thing that they think of.
mhm.
Um, because this involves so many other things. The right to work is a huge thing. It's like
Yeah.
and the child labor laws. Um, why is this in your opinion? Why do you believe that for one that this has been spun so negatively, and why has it been um, asphyxiated? I guess to libertarians or amongst those group of people as an insult.
Well, I think basically, people sense the uncomfortable territory very easily when it comes to age of consent, and it's the uncomfortableness is just at an all-time high there, and they're not confident that they can work out an amicable solution here, so they just leave the whole thing alone. They don't want to unravel that little bow that they've got there. I'll just accept whatever the current social norms are, and then nobody can blame me for accepting the current social norm. They can't blame me for accepting that. It's just what everybody believes. Basically, they just have a lack of confidence in their ability to really address this properly. And the best uh, sort of argument on this front, on the front of children's rights, the best sort of treatment of it ever is this paper called from a guy called Ian Hersom, friend of mine, um, called "A Rational Theory of the Rights of Children." You can look it up. You can find the PDF online quite easily. Um, and basically, the idea is on the rational approach to it is we have to just throw out all of these cultural norms. We're not just accepting them on face value. We got to really analyze the situation. What is it that would be specific to a child that would sort of play on rights theory? And the idea is that a child can't communicate his will, and that is the precise legal definition of a child given on this viewpoint. So a person who's asleep, they would be a child in the legal sense. A person who's in a coma, they would be a child. A person who's like passed out in the snow, they'd be a child. And of course, the very young, they would be a child, right? The what is specific to them, as against anybody else, is that they cannot communicate their will. So if you come across the sleeping man in the snow, and you want to take him to hospital, uh, what would be the justification of taking him to the hospital? Is there some implicit contract, which a lot of people like to use there, where you're allowed to take him to the hospital? It's not really clear what exactly is being contracted there, because contract just is a set of terms for how you transfer property from different people. He's certainly not transferring his body because you can't do that. So implicit contracts are out. So what the idea is that you don't know what it is that he wants done with his property. So what you're allowed to do to him is to preserve him in order that he can then wake up at some point and tell you what he wants done, and then he can negotiate for his own care. And maybe he'll get pissed off. It's like, well, I wanted to die out there. It's like, well, okay, well, write that on your chest next time, and then make it clear that you want to die
Yeah.
out in the snow, and then people won't be allowed to do that to you, right? But it was unknowable at that point. Is the idea that so therefore you're allowed to preserve that will until such a time that it can be read, until such a time that he's able to communicate with you. And the same is true for the very young. They are not physically capable of like really understanding language. They haven't quite developed the prowess which would be required to say, yes, I want to go down in that coal mine, and I understand all the risks there, and I really understand what it is that I'm saying here, right? Rather than just like repeating certain sentences like people speak in their sleep all the time. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
that they're consenting to whatever, right? So that is what it is about a child, in the sense of a very young person. That is why you aren't allowed to just, have sex with them or send them into a burning volcano or throw them up onto a power line or something like that. That is why, because they don't understand what it is they're saying. So they might as well just be saying blah 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 blah. Right? It would be no different in terms of law. Um, but as a child develops, they start to understand certain things. Maybe they can understand what it actually entails for them to have a paper round, where they start
Yeah.
delivering papers to the different neighbors and they get some money from that. Maybe they understand that at a certain point, and then they'd be allowed to consent to that type of work. And the anti-child labor laws, they're it's basically driven by people who are jealous and don't have that kind of drive and want to see everybody else have that drive stamped out of them. So it's like, no, you're not allowed to do that, little Johnny. You're not allowed to work in your family's cafe or something, even though they fully understand what it is that they're accepting here. And that is why there's no such a thing as an age of consent, because people develop at different rates and for different things. So it might be that I can understand the risks involved in doing a paper round, but I can't understand the risks involved in working in a nuclear reactor. So I wouldn't be allowed to consent to that line of work, but I would be allowed to consent to the paper round. Um,
Yeah.
and so different people are going to develop at different rates. Like, there are some people, they have, like, certain mental problems where it might take them until they're in their 30s before they can really grasp what it means to consent to sex, right? And we wouldn't want these people to just be raped essentially by saying, no, they're 18, they must be able to consent now. And it goes the other way. There might be somebody who is 17 years old, and they're perfectly capable of understanding what it is that they're doing, and you're just saying, nope, they're not 18 yet, so they're clearly not able to do anything, right? And it's the same. It's like there are so many instances where it's clear that this is an insufficient system, age of consent. That is, you have basically like the Romeo and Juliet laws, where they're both under 18, and then suddenly they're able to consent now. Like, it's not clear why that would be the case, and you have like different ages for different things, so it's clear that they accept that, yeah, oh, you can probably consent to sex at 18, but you can't consent to having alcohol. So they understand that there are different rates that you
Yeah.
develop certain capabilities before other capabilities, but then they just don't apply this consistently because basically the state can't handle such a thing because they're incompetent, and they don't think that they have the ability to really unravel this bow and really address this situation seriously. So they just ignore it completely and they don't want to touch it at all.
Well, and how could a state, which I would argue doesn't actually exist, it's mainly just a bunch of symbols and ceremonies, and like a state doesn't actually exist. It's just another group of people that just claims themselves to be a state. But how could an institution like that even begin to unravel such a thing? Of course, they're going to have to blanket in anything. That's why everyone is demanded to get health care, or everyone it's like vehicle insurance. That gets me hot. That gets me so pissed. And it's like, of course, that's why everyone's required to get vehicle insurance, because they can't determine on an individual basis who is more likely to get in a vehicle accident, or more likely, uh, or who deserves to have a certain amount of coverage, or any of these other things, which would actually make it more sensible.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. There are very, I mean, I can't think, at least off the top of my head, of anything. Well, for one, I can't think of anything good that the state does, but I mean, they're very good at violence. They're very good at that.
Well,
Um,
I mean, are they even good at violence? I think an ANCAP private security force would probably be far superior at enacting violence, but
yeah,
they'd be more
that's
just
true.
in it. They're good at being criminals.
Yes,
They're good at being bad.
yes, they're just good at being bad at everything they do.
Yeah.
yeah, it's the age of consent thing, it just really confuses me, and I was speaking with a friend about this the other day. It really pisses me off with the libertarians because, like, all of a sudden, there'll be somebody running for office, and there'll be somebody who's well known or whatever, and they'll get on a legitimate debate stage, and then they'll get up and say something about age of consent. And that's probably not the best way to run. That's probably not the best thing to put out on your at the very front of your campaign. Um, Even if it's a principled stance, it's just always amazing to me, and it seems as though that has been used to keep uh, a lot of people who might be able to affect actual change, to keep them suppressed, because the general public hears that and they're not going to be okay with that,
Mhm.
because
But
their mind automatically goes to this really disgusting place.
what the principled people out there, the remnant, should be thinking about this is, yes, the public are going to be disgusted, but the public will also be disgusted when you say that you want to legalize fentanyl, right? The public are going to be disgusted by your entire platform. Like, they're completely irrelevant, and the public, the sheep people, they're completely ineffectual in any sort of political change. They can't do anything. They're just basically, we've got this big ball rolling down the hill, and we're trying to change the direction of this ball. The ball is filled with these people. They're just the inertia of the ball. They're just in there adding mass to this ball. They're not changing its direction at all.
Yeah.
They're just in that ball, and they're just the inertia. And they're going to make it hard to shift the ball. You know, you shouldn't be concerned with making sure that you shouldn't, when they say, "Hey, don't be shifting the ball like that. You should be shifting the ball like I'm saying." Don't listen to them, because they're not fucking shifting the ball. It's not their job to shift the ball. They can't shift the
Yeah.
ball unless they actually, graduate, grow the fuck up, and start thinking. Which, ironically, these people who are so concerned about the age of consent, they have a far lesser intellectual capacity than a lot of children. So, that tells you everything you need to know, I think.
Well, thanks to those government schools, there's a lot of them. So, um, one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I thought you would have an interesting take on this, is what do you feel, if any, is the place of certain ideas in not only the individual but society as a whole? Um, Certain ideas like duty and honor, do those play a role? And if they do, how important are these ideas?
So I'd say something like duty. If you're taking it as like a deontology sort of thing, where like Kantian ethics, where it's like you should do this because it's your duty for no other reason, that would be a bad sense of duty. But if it's something like, oh, I have a duty to refrain from infringing upon your rights, that's a good sense of duty. It's not just because it's your duty; it's because otherwise you're a whim worshipping jungle demon, right? That would be the reason why. There's further stuff to. Its duty is just a stand-in for this whole array of prior ethics which is going on under there. Um, and for something like honor, um, let's sort of analyze the concept of what it means to be honorable. Maybe that means that you are doing right by your ancestors, in which case it would be a bad thing. Don't be doing things because you'd be doing right by your ancestors. Maybe honorable means something like integrity, though, where you are just really just being yourself and sticking to your guns, and you're not caring what the hordes of second-handers are telling you, like the sort of, in this sense of honorable, where it means integrity. The good fictional archetype for this would be Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead. That if you read that book, it's a brilliant book. That'll give you an idea of what I'm getting at when I say integrity, where it's just a completely integrated man. He's just stalwart in doing things the right way. He isn't concerned with compromising his values for inferiors, for second-handers, for anybody like that. And that would be a good sense of honorable. So if that is the sense that somebody is saying you should be honorable in, then definitely, stick to your word. It would be
Yeah.
that's a way to say that you're honorable. He's honorable. He sticks to his word. That, yeah, definitely be honorable in that sense.
Another thing I kind of wanted to touch on too, and this is something I've really been digging into, the importance of, uh because it seems like we are in such a deficit, but the importance of shame
Mhm.
in, or like social stigma. Because my personal opinion is that there is a first of all, there's a healthy way to go about it. Obviously, something like this could be abused and used against people in a very negative way, but I can't think of anything that couldn't be abused and used in a negative way. Um, but there seems to be like this ultimate deficit of shame, which seems to be some type of like self-governance on like a societal level. And I look at things like the anti-shame movement, which just it seems to have sprung up out of nowhere over the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 years or something, fat shaming, slut shaming, whatever. And I'm not saying these people should be shamed necessarily. However, there there seems to be this proponent of fighting against shame, and all the people who do it seem to be statists. And so I kind of wanted to get your take on, what do you believe the importance of shame plays in a culture?
So there are sort of, I think, two different angles I want to approach this from. The first is this idea of, like, slut shaming, fat shaming. What this is getting at, what shaming is meaning there, is really judgment. It's judging what someone is doing, and this goes back to the Christian ethics: judge not. Right? It's not your place to be judging these people. That's on God to judge them. Um, so in that sense, the anti-shaming movement would be an outgrowth of Christian ethics, and it would be horrible. I think it's completely incorrect. It's a complete inversion of the correct ethical principle, which is judge. You should be judging people. You should be evaluating everything that comes across your vision. You should be integrating this
Yeah.
knowledge, seeing how it plays into your life. Is this good? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this a true thing? Is this a false thing? Doing this with everything that comes across you, right? You should be evaluating everything, judge everything is the correct ethical principle there. And then there'd be another sense, which would be shame is meaning, like, this deep sense of, like, oh, I'm feeling bad about something here. This feels wrong. And again, with the Christian ethics, it would be, you are a sinner by birth. You should feel constantly shameful of yourself.
Yeah.
Which is funny, right? You should be, it's sort of a guilt thing. You should be guilty. You should are feeling guilty for something. Now, there is a proper rule. You shouldn't be feeling guilty just as a matter of principle, just all the time feeling guilty for everything you do, right? Because that's incorrect. You're just, you're not applying uh, a correct evaluation to everything here. Um, Unless you really are just that evil, right? Where
Yeah.
everything you do is evil. But that is the idea. Feel guilty when you do something that is wrong. You should feel guilty for that. And you should beat yourself up to the correct degree. So this is another thing where, maybe you make a mistake. You do something bad, like uh, I don't know, you're like playing baseball and you hit the ball and you smash somebody's window. It's like, oh Jesus, that was something bad that I did. You should beat yourself up to the degree that it was within your control, right? So another example would be, I can't think of another example. My apologies, but yeah. So not everything is within your control. You need to really analyze what is actually within your control. Maybe it's something like, so to elucidate that principle, where it is within my control to choose to speak Spanish, but indirectly, I can do that by taking Spanish lessons over and over and over again, and eventually I'll know how to speak Spanish, right? So that is within my control, but indirectly. I can't just choose to speak Spanish tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Whereas something which is in my direct control is what to say next. Whether I put my thumb or my middle finger up right now, like I chose to do that. I was able to choose to do that. That's within my direct control. So you know, really make sure so there are two deviations you can make where you're feeling too guilty and where you're not feeling guilty enough, where you are you've done something. It's like, oh well, that's an impasse. Water under the bridge. Maybe you uh, killed someone. Just to take a crazy
Yeah.
example. And you're like, well, I don't agree that was good. And I've learned my lesson, so I shouldn't feel guilty about it because I've learned my lesson. I learned that it was wrong, and now I'm just going to go along with it. No, you should. Even if you learned your lesson, you should understand that that was a horrible thing that you did, and you should feel very, very guilty about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It just is crazy to me. I've argued with so many people about, and then this kind of all just ties in together. It's really one big question to me. The question of like honor and duty and having shame or feeling shame for doing shameful things. Um, because there seems to be, especially within the libertarian movement. So I'm really involved in, the libertarian circles in my area. And so I have a lot of these conversations, and there's this really fine line, but it's very pronounced between libertarianism and libertinism. And there seems to be a lot of libertines who just come in and there's just like no morals, no ethics. It's just like this hedonism based philosophy, or it's so hands off. It's like, well, whatever happens happens, it doesn't really matter, as long as I'm not actively going and stealing the little old lady's purse,
Mhm,
then it doesn't matter even if somebody does, because, well, it's not my place. And to me, I think that that's such a bastardization of any sort of objective truth about liberty itself.
mhm.
So go
Yeah,
ahead.
so that would be sort of like a related error to those who think that that law is not a subset of ethics. Those who think that law is all there is in ethics, and there's no ethics outside of law. That uh, just do whatever you want so long as you're not hurting people, and it's fine, it's good. Right? They're ignoring ethics answers a subtly different question to the question that is being answered by law, and they need to recognize this and recognize that what they're doing is being they've studied one narrow area of ethics and try to generalize it to all of ethics, but it doesn't work that way. They have to study ethics in general if they want a general ethical theory.
So do you believe, and maybe this is the incorrect way to ask this, but like, do you believe, as far as if somebody was of that mindset, that secular ethics would be a way to go? Now, I'm a really big fan of UPB, universally preferred behavior. Um, I think there are, it's not perfect, obviously, but I am a big fan of the concept that there is a universally preferred behavior across all cultures, across all societies. Uh, I don't really care where you are. It's wrong to murder somebody. So, do you believe that that's something worth people diving into, whether they're novice or even a little bit more advanced down the philosophical trail, I guess?
Um, well, I haven't actually read Molyneux's book on it. I think it was a book or something.
Yeah.
So I couldn't give a proper opinion on it yet. Um, but I would say definitely with respect to the lead up to that, yeah, you would need a secular morality because you really need to ground your morality in proper philosophy. Don't ground it in this supernaturalism. Don't ground it in this mysticism, because you're just giving ammunition to all of the worst kinds of people. You're not doing anything good there.
Yeah. So, what do you think, like, the fundamental belief of I'm just gonna categorize them as just the statists, because there's just seems to be, like, and I'm talking about people that straight cuck for the state. Like, these people that just, without a doubt, you talk to them, and I mean, the Rhodes people.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think, like, the fundamental basis of these people's belief and view on the world is? Um, because it doesn't quite seem historically, at least to me, it doesn't quite seem historically to be of any one particular status belief. It seems like a new, like a neo sort of statist.
So I would say with these people, that what's going on there is they have an insecurity about themselves, because I don't think they have an explicit philosophy at all. They have implicitly, through osmosis, just absorbed the general message from every philosopher ever that your mind is worthless, it can't know anything, you're worthless, and you should just shut up and obey your duty. And then they're looking for someone to give them some direction to do something because they think that they can't do it themselves. Um, and then they look towards the state, and the state tells them you have to do X, Y, Z. They look towards the church. The church tells them you have to do X, Y, Z. It's all of they look towards. They're looking for some sort of dictator to tell them what to do, um, and fundamentally, I don't think it's necessarily. Can't remember exactly what I was gonna go into next. So it's something about them it being a new form of state. Yes, so I don't think it would be understandable that perhaps a bit of a selection bias here, because these hordes, who are unthinking completely, they have zero effect on the history of philosophy. They're completely irrelevant in terms of the history of philosophy. So we're not recording the Marodzer from pre-Socratic times. We're not
Yeah,
recording the Marodzer from medieval times. We're not recording any of these people because they're completely irrelevant. They don't do anything. They aren't moving philosophy in any particular direction. They're just the inertia, which is just getting pushed along. And we don't record the inertia at all. And so they're always going to just seem like, well, we haven't heard things like this before. But in the explicit form, we can trace down where explicitly did this come from. It came from probably someone like Kant or Plato or Aristotle, someone like that. Some
yeah,
actual philosopher out there has originated these beliefs, and they are just kind of like vaguely spouting them.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's another thing that really irritates me about a lot of this, is because I've spent a lot of time reading, spent a lot of time by myself looking into these ideas, and obviously I can't expect everyone to waste their time reading. I don't really think it was a waste of time, but nonetheless, it's just such an ignorant place to come from, and then come in with such, like, such confidence that this is the way that things should be, or that it was just like arguing with these people pushing climate change. And it's like, this is what I do. Like, I am constantly trying to fight against censorship, and trying to speak objective truth, trying to get the message out there. And then there's just like these group of people that, regardless of whatever is said to them, whatever logic or reason, evidence is provided, it's just like a complete rejection. And it's like, oh, well, no, science is not bought and paid for. It's just that the science is popular because good ideas eventually float to the top. And it's like, that is such an ignorant position to take.
Yeah, so on like their confidence that you're mentioning there, I think it's basically an analogous thing that happens when there's like this certain type of brain damage where the part of your brain which deals with like yourself, like who you are, just gets like destroyed or damaged in some way, and you just have no clue who you are, and so you just adopt whatever personality is in front of you. So if you see, a bus driver, you're going to pretend like you're a bus driver. You're going to start acting like a bus driver, and then you see like a cyclist. You're going to think that you're a cyclist. You're going to act like a cyclist. You just
Yeah,
adopt whatever is going on around you. Just whoever you're looking at, you're going to pretend that you're them, right?
yeah,
Um, it's like mimic syndrome or mirror syndrome or something like that.
yeah,
Um, so I think that is there's a similar basis here with these people, is that they have seen that this is the way that debates go, that some prime mover is confident and is espousing their position confidently, and they've just adopted not only the position secondhand without actually evaluating the position. And Jordan Peterson talks about that in his Maps of Meaning, where they're adopting these positions, they're borrowing these ideas, and they haven't actually digested them at all. They're bromides, in the words of Ayn Rand. Just completely packaged philosophy, basically. That not only are they adopting that, borrowing that, but they're also borrowing the form of engagement from these people. They're borrowing that, oh, yes, I should have the same confidence, even though I have no clue what was the basis of that confidence
yeah.
or what has driven any of this. I'm just going to adopt it secondhand because they're doing a similar thing here. They're negating their reason. They're avoiding using their reason at any cost, right? They're trying to stop using their brain, which is the same thing as this brain damage thing I was talking about, where you,
Yeah.
you just you just don't have a view of yourself at all. You just adopt whatever's going on around you. That's a very similar thing to the second hander.
And so it really is just the difference between a leader and a follower.
Mhm.
That this follower's just gonna mimic something they saw that might have been successful or might just be attractive to that one person, and then they're just gonna mimic it just like a parrot.
Mhm. Yeah,
That yeah, that's so frustrating. That's I mean, it I think it does lend credence to the idea that I think it's like 60% of people. I could be wrong on the percentage, but there a large number of people just walk around with no internal monologue.
yeah.
And it's like, that is so scary to me.
And
Like,
on the view of Ayn Rand, language plays a very important part of the process of concept formation, because you can't really retain a concept until you've attached a label to it.
yeah.
Like the word tree. Like I could look at all sorts of different trees and sort of abstract what it means to have treeness. Through like if you want to read up on this, go to my lookazulu.github.io/brain and look up theory of concepts, something like that, the objectivist theory of concepts, whatever. Um, yeah, I could go through that entire process, a very complex process, which only humans can do, as far as we can tell. And I can have the concept of treeness in my head, but if I don't attach a label to it, it's just going to float out of my head, and I can't recall it again. So I'd have to go through the entire process of, oh, what was it with those things out in that direction? Oh, that's oh, yes, I now understand it again, and then I can start working with it. So I need
Yeah.
to attach a label to it, and that what that is doing is it's turning it into an actual concrete thing. I can write tree down on a piece of paper, and I can look at that as a concrete stand-in for the concept, and I go, "Yep, I know what concept that represents." So I would say there's probably a relation there with the people who have no internal monologues. They can't hear words in their head.
Yeah, that's just crazy to me. My brain just doesn't function that way. And so to think somebody's just out there just walking with nothing going on is
What what's
so hard
what's
for me to
really
imagine.
What's really crazy is the people like there's also aphantasia where you can't picture things in your head. Like if you think of like an apple, you just like think of like vague concepts related to appleness rather than actually seeing an apple in your head. You can't actually picture things in your head. So I
Oh,
want to know
that's
what the intersection of these two things, where you have no internal monologue and you can't see things in your head. Like what the hell is going on up there? Like what is even happening?
yeah, I mean, that leads to a lot of crazy ideas of exactly what the hell is going on out in the world, because I mean, that's just like a literal NPC
Yeah.
just walking around, which I think just makes that meme just even that much funnier. Like, that's just wild, which I guess that's why certain things like, a psychological operation or just like large scale brainwashing just works so well. And people are just able to just absorb it. And, that there's the famous thing that Edward Bernays did, um, pushing propaganda to up the sale of pork. And now all of a sudden in the United States, bacon and eggs is just like the American breakfast. And it's like that was completely just based off of propaganda
Is that the
to
same Bernays who made the sauce? Or is that a different Bernays?
no, different Bernays, I believe.
I was thinking it's food related. I was gonna make a Bernays sauce joke, and I was like, wait, maybe it is the same Bernays.
But yeah, it's crazy. It's just I mean, I laugh about this, that the same Edward Bernays, he created a propaganda campaign during the suffragettes movement, the women's right to vote movement
Mhm.
of at the time, women weren't allowed to smoke in public. And all of a sudden he pushes a campaign of women smoking in public and holding up the cigarettes as torches of freedom. And it's like that just got absorbed so well by so many people, and it's like, that
Very
is
Randian.
yes, yeah, it's and it I just look at like a public relations campaign like that, and I'm like, "That's beautiful. That is just beautiful." It's nefarious, but it's beautiful, man. That's so I guess the MPC is just it's real. It is real. And so we'll start wrapping up on this because I don't want to keep you too long. But throughout all of your experience, what what do you think is the antidote to all of this? Because obviously the path that we are on is I'll just keep it at Western civilization is not sustainable. And there obviously is a clear path in which things should be operating. I wholeheartedly believe in anarcho-capitalism, and that would allow humanity to just excel to such a degree that we have never seen before. So, what do you believe the antidote is to the current NPC chaos that we're living through?
Um, be like me. Um, integrate objectivism and anarcho-capitalism. Do it well and spread it. Those are the steps you can take within your own life. Obviously, I'm not going to advocate this as some sort of a duty. But if you enjoy doing that sort of thing, then do it yourself. If you don't enjoy doing it, but you enjoy seeing it done, then hey, Kofi.com/LucaZulu. You can support
Yeah.
that type of thing being done. But yeah, that's the basic praxis there. That's how you solve it, and you're not going to solve it by trying to appeal for votes or trying to appeal to everybody in the room. That's just going counterproductive because, in the words of Leonard Reed, what the politician is he's just a thermometer of the political temperature. Right? There's a certain political temperature in the room, and the politician is just a thermometer of that. The politician, as a politician, at least, the politician might be doing other things on the side where he is moving the temperature, but in his duties as a politician, just as a politician, he is not doing anything. He's following the political temperature. This is why you see, like Biden back in the 80s, he was decrying gay marriage, and now he's loving it, right? Because he's
Yeah.
following the political temperature, and he has to, or else he's out of office, right? All of the politicians have to do this. They aren't the prime movers. They are also second handers. The
Yeah.
dictator is also a second hander. He isn't the one driving what people believe, he is still following along with what people believe. He still has to adopt whatever the popular message is, or else he doesn't get to be a dictator, right?
Yeah.
This is what is found out in the Fountainhead. If you read it, it's a big revelation when you get there, and you'll be like, Eureka! I completely understand what it is that Zulu's talking about here, because I can see it in actual perceptual form, which is the purpose of art, is to concretize a philosophy. And the Fountainhead is brilliant at this. So you should read it if you want to know more about that. Yeah, that's the upshot. Just yeah, be like me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's well said. Um, Something that was said to me recently that I thought was really interesting is that this I don't want to call it a war because I think that that whole idea, the war on this, the war on that is I don't know, it's colloquial. It
Drugs have
colloq-
won the war on drugs.
yes, yeah, exactly. It's just so strange to call like the war on whatever. But this thing that we're going through, which I am entirely sick of, it's going to be won in the home, and it's going to be fought. It's being fought at the individual level because that's who they're trying to distinguish or extinguish, I should say, is the individual. And so, one of the best ways I personally have found to fight back against a lot of this is changing yourself, working on yourself, and just becoming better, becoming smarter, learning. Learning. I'll just stick with that. Just learning different things and becoming more independent.
Yeah,
Um,
learning out loud.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So on that, I think we'll wrap up. But I do have one last question. This is a question I ask all of my guests because I absolutely love getting the different perspectives, and I think you're going to have a really interesting answer to this. Um, why does liberty matter in the first place? Like why does any of this matter?
Because you have free will. Your mind is able to change things. You're able to choose your actions. And therefore, there are certain choices which you make that are wrong. Just by definition, you shouldn't make those choices. It's the irreducible primary of ought not, which is, I suppose, not even irreducible. It's just not, don't, false, incorrect. That is the primary there. It's incorrect that you should be evil and aggressive, just in the exact same way that it's incorrect that A is non-A. These are the same type of statement. One is an epistemic norm, sure, and the other is an ethical norm, but they're both norms fundamentally. If I say that the sky is blue, what I'm saying is you ought to believe that the sky is blue. I'm still making an ought claim there, right? So I don't want to be hearing any of this nonsense which we hear all over the place, that ought statements have no meaning. It's just mere semantics. It doesn't pertain to reality at all. No, this is a real issue. There really is this thing called conflicts out there, and you get into them all the goddamn time, right? Every time you see on your tax bill, on your paycheck, that tax, that is a conflict being initiated against you. That's very important for your life. Every time somebody scrapes your car and just drives off, that's an aggression being done against you. You need to stop all of these things, and you will be much, much, much happier. That is how you survive. This is these aggressive activities. They are apocalyptic, right? We all understand why apocalypse is bad. These activities are their own mini level of apocalypse. And that is why liberty matters, because it's anti apocalypse.
I think that was very well said. Do you want to give your shout outs where people can find you, what you have going on, if people want to learn more?
Sure, you can find me on youtube.com/Liquid Zulu for my videos. I got an AI art video coming down the pipeline shortly. Um, I've got courses being worked on liquidzulu.github.io. You can see the link just below my name there. There's only one course out in the moment, but I think it's a good one. It's a real doozy. And then there's also my wiki, which is liquidzulu.github.io/brain. And you can find out that is the main source of my attempted integration of objectivism and anarcho-capitalism. It's going to be there. So I'm going over the entire theory of all of philosophy, right down from metaphysics, all the way up into the remote conclusions within economics. So theoretically, once it's all done, if it's done in a certain sense, it's when it's at a sufficient point, then you'll be able to trace right down from the Cantillon effect all the way back to the primacy of existence. If you click enough times, it's going to be just the best wiki that has ever been made. And you can find that there. It's still a work in progress. I'm only, sort of into the epistemology at the moment. I'm up onto the theory of concept formation, so breaking out of the epistemology soon. But yeah, it's a great place to go.
Hell yeah. I'm gonna have to check that out because that sounds incredible, honestly. And to have such a resource like that available, honestly, good on you. I hope that you know that really does change everything for the better.
Mhm.
Um, what's interesting right before we close out here, um, I had actually found you through YouTube initially, and I had followed you on Twitter and YouTube, but I never connected the two. I didn't like put the two together and realize you were of one. And so before the the debate, um, I had realized, oh yeah, I've already been watching this guy. That makes a lot of sense. So that's really cool to hear that you've put together something like that. And honestly, everyone listening, if you're listening to this, make sure and go check that out because that's going to be an invaluable resource. If you're listening to this and you've made it this far, then I'm sure you're going to find it very interesting. So hey, I would like to thank you very much for coming on. This was awesome. We'll have to get you back on, have some more discussions. We'll get into some more specific topics and dive deeper next time. Um, I think that would be a lot of fun. I am not able to have a lot of these conversations, so with too many people, anyways. So yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on this time. And everyone else listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Rise to Liberty. We've got some more episodes scheduled, so just keep an eye out. We streamed to Instagram for this one, which I think is interesting. Hopefully that went well. I'll check the analytics later. It was a new thing they offered, and got quite a few followers over there. So figured couple of people might find it interesting.
What the hell, right? More
Yeah,
streams.
exactly. Just trying to figure out where to get the most traction. So, because just like you, I'm trying to put these ideas out there, and boy, you're right. There's a lot of people that do end up laughing at you, but I just keep chugging along, man. So, all right. And on that note, everyone else, until next time, stay free, my friends.
Woot woot.